Okay, guys, we are moving into the second lecture of Module 8. I know we had some homework assignments. I gave you a 9/11 assignment last Friday for you to work on. I hope you watched that video. It's kind of important from a historical standpoint. Personally for me, it just reminds me of that day. It gets a little emotional. I know for you guys it might be a little different because you weren't born, but I wanted you to speak with individuals who were around. And I'm getting responses, and I've got several responses from many of you that spoke with people that you care about that remember exactly what they were doing. But we do have to shift back to Module 8. The plan is to lecture today, probably do another lecture tomorrow and wrap it all up, which will get us to Wednesday, and we'll do some type of review where I'll talk about what's going to be on the test again. And then your test on Module 8 will probably be Thursday, okay? So let's plan on that. And I'll remind you in Google Classroom, keep doing all of your work, keep turning all of it in. I've been getting a good amount of you catching up with things that you've missed, so I want to just make sure that you are staying on track. So when we get back into the classroom in the near future here, we'll be able to keep up with it and do what we have to do to keep pushing forward, okay? So let's go with some notes here, about another 13 to 15 minute lecture about some things. Clearly the big issue that we need to discuss as we head into these decades of the 1840s, 50s, and 60s is slavery, okay? This issue is not just about the economy of the South, it is about the politics in Washington, D.C., okay? It is a huge, divisive issue in our country, and we need to look at it really quick. So here's the deal. When you're looking at our country as a whole, all right, we've got all of these states on the East Coast. We talked about getting into the Oregon country. We talked about going to war and getting this territory. Now we're forming states, okay? Missouri, the good old state of Missouri, across the Mississippi River, is ready to apply for statehood, okay? And this is a big deal because either it's going to come in as a free state or it's going to come in as a slave state, right? And there's that balance in Washington that allows for the same amount of free, the same amount of slave states, and therefore no one gets the upper hand when we're dealing with issues. So James Talmadge is from Pennsylvania, and he says, let's outlaw slavery in Missouri. Let's just outlaw it. Not going to have it. Well, clearly if you live in Tennessee, Alabama, parts of the area, and parts of southern Missouri, there were slaves that were around. Well, clearly they weren't in favor of it. So if you look at this map right here, this shows you where all of the slaves are, and then you can see there's small traces of slaves that are being brought into Missouri, and Talmadge wants to end it, okay? Clearly the South says no, they don't want Missouri joining the Union anyway. Let's keep the equal balance that we have. Why rock the boat? But this is an issue that needs to be dealt with, right? And we need to deal with it head on. They want to keep those states the same. This is a civics lesson for you that we've kind of talked about. As long as they're the same amount of free and same amount of slave states. In the Senate, where you only get 2 senators per state, it doesn't matter how big or small your state is, you get 2 votes, they're always going to tie. And nothing's ever going to get accomplished. Southern senators block the admission bill, and we come up with what's called the Missouri Compromise. So this gets you onto page 3 of your notes. And the Missouri Compromise is really simple. It's sponsored by our guy Henry Clay, who we've talked about. And Missouri will come in as a slave state. So Missouri is going to enter the Union as a slave state, all right? Maine is going to jump in as a free state, so you have that balance, 1 free state, 1 slave state, and this keeps that balance in the Senate, okay? Slavery is prohibited north of the 3630 latitude and longitude line. So they did make a line and said any new states that come in below this line have the option for slavery. Any states above are not allowed to have slaves. So here's your line, okay? I know if it's hard to see and I'm pointing. Anything below this line can be a slave state. Anything above it is going to remain free, okay? So let's get into Andrew Jackson in the middle of page 3. We've got the election of 1824. There's really only one political party at this time. It's the Democratic Republican Party. So we are backtracking, okay? The Mexican War, the war with Mexico, the Texan War for independence, these have not happened yet. We're just kind of setting those up, okay? 4 candidates are going to run for president, all right? And here's who we got. We got 4 men here. And we're going to go through each of them right now. So Andrew Jackson is going to get the popular votes, but not a majority of the Electoral College. This is a big issue for you guys. If you remember, the Electoral College is what determines the president, and it's not the popular vote. And in the previous elections, people believe that the popular vote should be the end vote, right? How people want or who they believe should be president should be president. That hasn't been the case, and it still isn't the case. Something will have to change in the Constitution in order for that to happen. So he gets the popular vote, but not the electoral votes. So when you're looking at all of this, John Quincy Adams is going to have more votes, okay, than Andrew Jackson is. And Andrew Jackson doesn't understand. One of the reasons that people were so big on Andrew Jackson was because of the fact that he was a simple man. He was uneducated. He couldn't read, but he was a general. He was a war hero. And people were able to relate to this man rather than some politician who's been a politician all his life. They're a very rich family, and they are not able, you're not able to associate with them. This is one of the problems I have as an individual in our country today, right? It's hard for me, personally, to identify with presidential candidates, whoever they are. Whether it's Donald Trump, Barack Obama, George Bush, Bill Clinton, all of these individuals are very wealthy men. And it's hard for me to identify with them and say that they have my best interest at heart, right? But as a democracy, we have to vote, and we have to get out and vote and say who we want to be president. And people came out and voted for Andrew Jackson, but he doesn't win the Electoral College, okay? Because he doesn't win it, the House of Representatives, so those men in the Capitol are going to decide, all right? Henry Clay, who is from Kentucky, who was running for president, magically decides to throw his support to John Quincy Adams, okay? I say magically with air quotes, and what do you know? John Quincy Adams wins the vote, he wins the election, and he becomes president, and Andrew Jackson is shoved off to the side, okay? Once John Quincy Adams becomes president of the United States, he gives a job to Henry Clay, who helped him win the election. Now you can believe in coincidences if you want, it just happened, but this is a little strange in politics. Something strange in politics, right? And magically Henry Clay gets a sweet deal. Secretary of State, you get to travel the world, you get to represent the United States and countries all over the world. You get to live a great, lavish lifestyle. And Andrew Jackson is irate. He believes some type of corrupt bargain was made. And he's probably right. Henry Clay and John Quincy Adams made a deal the night before the vote, and it went in John Quincy Adams' favor. Okay? Andrew Jackson is irate and decides he has to form his own party. We can't just have the Democratic Republicans, we have to split up. Okay? Jackson creates a party, and we know it today as the Democrats. So Andrew Jackson, mad at the fact that he lost the election, creates the Democratic Party, okay? John Quincy Adams only has 1 term in office. People are upset with the corrupt bargain. That story gets brought out. There's fighting within his party. The party's split, and he is only going to serve 1 term, okay? So let's get to the election of 1828. Now we have Andrew Jackson and John Quincy Adams going at each other again. Andrew Jackson has his own party, the Democrats. John Quincy Adams has his Democratic Republicans, and he is going to destroy John Quincy Adams. He's a well-known war hero, war general, and he relates to the people with the fact that he comes from poverty and was uneducated, and this time there's no doubt he's going to win. Okay, this map, just look, the blue represents Andrew Jackson, the brown represents John Quincy Adams, and everyone, for the most part, is throwing their support towards our boy Andrew Jackson. Okay? States that allowed people to vote were heavily behind Jackson. They were huge fans of the man. And he was elected by that common man, right? This is where it comes into play with the Electoral College and the House of Representatives. Should they play a role in choosing our president? This is a decision that still hasn't been made or changed yet. We will go. I will go and vote in November. Your family members will go and vote in November. Some of you, if you're not 18 and you're not 18 by the election, you won't be able to vote, right? But should our vote be the end? And that, should we have that final say? That's the question. And at this time, we don't. But there was no doubt that people and the Electoral College and everyone, and that election wasn't close, that Andrew Jackson was going to win. Okay? These are those common men. We're kind of talking about common men and women, hardworking, blue-collar, people that put their nose to the grindstone and worked hard and earned that living. We're relating to a man like Andrew Jackson, not a man like John Quincy Adams, who was basically an upper-class citizen thrown into politics because his family was in politics, and he is going to lose to Andrew Jackson. Okay? So then we get to Jackson's inaugural party. He comes in, and he's the first considered Western president, which is kind of funny when you think about it. At this time in our country's history, Tennessee is considered West. We clearly know that the rest of the country will phase in as time goes on. And his election, though, signals that we're no longer just focusing on this area, right, of like the 13 colonies anymore. We are shifting. Our country is shifting towards this way to where all of these areas are going to become populated with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, and we'll continue that concept of manifest destiny, where we take more land and continue to push west. Okay? Andrew Jackson also signaled the spread of democracy. Most states allow people to vote for president. They did away with qualifications. Each state was making rules in terms of what they wanted to do, and you were allowed to vote. Male, of a certain age, I believe it was 18. They used to make you own that property, but many states said, no, not everyone owns property, so why should that be a qualification? And as long as you showed up on that election day, you were given an opportunity to vote. Okay? The last thing we'll finish with here is the spoils system, really quick. Andrew Jackson does something where he begins putting people that he can trust into positions of authority. This to spoil someone, right? They helped him get elected. They are receiving jobs. The problem was whether or not they were necessarily qualified, okay? Just because I might have helped Andrew Jackson win the presidency doesn't mean I should become the Secretary of War because he wants me in that position, right? So many of his opponents condemn it, but he basically said, I win, my choices. I get to decide what I want to do, okay? This practice is called patronage. It allows Jackson to put people in a position to get him reelected. So is this a fair practice? If they're not qualified, they probably shouldn't get that job. But Andrew Jackson is allowed to appoint those people. The senators and people in his party are going to approve them, and he's going to get those jobs. The spoils system became accepted and is used for decades. The practice became corrupt because people started to just put individuals in there that had money, that had influence, and no qualifications. And then we're going to slide into the Indian Removal Act of the next lecture, our final lecture that takes place. So a lot of stuff with Andrew Jackson and political parties and that issue of slavery. But look at your notes, which you should already have all the notes. You should have this PowerPoint from the previous lecture we did in the classwork stream. And we will wrap up Module 8 tomorrow when we talk about the Indians and the end of Andrew Jackson's time in office. Okay? Hope you guys had a good weekend. Welcome back to the grind, and I'll see you again tomorrow.